Hello, hello, everyone. This is Earth Sky Woman Tammy Brunk, and I'm beaming to you live with a report for March. It's so good to be with you again. I've missed you. What a incredible moment we get to be alive. So I'm here today with you to speak into, as you probably saw, the theme that I'm feeling for this month is that she is guiding us, and as much as it may not feel that way or look like that from the outside, this is what keeps coming through. And so I just want to begin with a couple of different, just like personal stories about how this is coming through. And the first is something interesting that had been happening over the last month. In my personal life, my mom had fallen and broken her arm. And so there was the need for some tending and caring. She lives by herself out on this little farm out in the middle of nowhere. And so that involved some family organizing and care. And I spent a good amount of time with her in that period, really in the coldest part of winter. And and then at the same time, I'd actually fallen and I'd hit my head. And so there was a lot that was going on for me personally during this last period. And of course, for all of us, we have been, even if you don't watch the news, even if you don't tune in, as probably some of you are in that practice, we're all in this world together, even if we're at different frequencies. And we're all feeling the rumblings of this massive shift and change. So I speak about my own personal journey here because I just want to share that, we're all going through our own versions of this, personally and collectively. So part of what I started to see showing up for me, I guess around Valentine's Day, is I had this one morning where I woke up and I looked around and I realized I had gotten myself these pink roses, um, and then I realized that so much in my realm was pink. Now, this is, the rose color is something that I've felt very resonant with for a while. And part of that is just because of the work I do with the sacred feminine and with the rose mysteries and Gaia Sophia and specifically the Magdalene mysteries and the womb work that I've done for many years now. That is a natural color when we're working with the feminine and working with that sacral and that womb medicine. However, the lighter pink color was something that I haven't really connected to. As a younger girl, woman, I was more of a tomboy. I was more oriented, one could say, to the color red, more oriented to, um, especially as a teenager, I really identified as kind of more of an anarchist and a punk rocker, it's more in that realm. I'm Gen X, right? So that pink color for me was almost embarrassing, just like this soft, the version of the feminine that we are enculturated to be. There was some sense of co-opting of that color, like that it was a kind of a weak thing, right? As a girl, as a female who was really in so much rebellion against particular feminine frequencies that felt like they were really hoisted upon me, right? So so I was surprised to recognize that all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I have so much light pink that's showing up everywhere that I'm drawn to, that I'm bringing into my life without realizing it. I realized I have this little rug that's pink. I was realizing I had gotten pink roses. I was realizing that I had these pink socks I was wearing, and then I had gotten a light pink sweater. That was very unusual. Um, and my yoga mat was pink. There was so many things that were pink. And it just kind of puzzled me. I was like, what is this with pink? And the other element of that that was kind of disconcerting was that it really reflected this energy that's been rising up inside of me that feels very different from what I'm seeing in the collective. And it feels very different from actually what I was sensing and feeling, even around winter solstice and that time period where I was very much connecting with the yang masculine. Perhaps that was the Pluto Mars opposition that I was really feeling was this very fiery energy of really almost a rebellion against the more passive feeling, what felt like passive feminine to me. So I've been feeling like many of you, these different currents that are kind of stirring and waking up inside of me. But I had a lot of judgment around that pink color and even a lot of resistance to sharing this month with that medicine, that energy. And the reason being that I have been concerned that in this moment, with what is happening here in the US specifically, that even working with that concept of the pink and of this more what feels soft energy could be mistaken for me sending out that message that what's happening out there is all okay, and that there's no need for us to take action or to be in a space of bringing in a different medicine to counter what is happening in our nation and in our world right now. Because as someone who is here in the US, um, like many of you, I have been deeply, deeply concerned and troubled um, by what's happening on the world stage right now. So I was really feeling internal, um, for lack of a better word, there's tension around even using this color. However, what I started to tune into when I was really dropping in with this and really connecting was to say that, and I'm beginning with kind of more of an overview of where I've been at. But now I'll talk about the astrology, which is that March and April are the two big months in 2025 in a year that arguably is featuring astrological events, the likes of which we as astrologers have not seen in our lifetime and really can't track back. Even using the technology that we use, we can't track back to find a time like now where we are having this many extraordinary events happening in succession. One of those, I've talked about this before, but one of those is that we have all of the outer planets changing signs within an 8-month period. You've got Pluto, everything from, Jupiter is going to be changing signs later this year. Saturn is going to be changing signs in May. And Uranus is going to be changing signs later this summer. And then also Neptune is changing signs within the next couple of months. And so that is unprecedented. Of those outer planets, two of those outer planets as are moving through what we can refer to as the Omega Alpha point, which is 29 Pisces to 0 Aries, and working with the tropical zodiac. That is a zone that is incredibly powerful and potent. It is like making a quantum leap, or it is, so what we've talked about collectively, astrologers and spiritual guides over the last number of years, when we're trying to make sense of the massive shifts and changes that have been underway for the last, really last 30 years, 40 years, that have been underway for quite some period of time now. Sorry, actually more like 70 at this point. When we talk about this window of time where there's so much rapid accelerated change, we we've been at the kind of the heart of that from 2017 to 2024. That's how I've been seeing it. And I've been seeing the Americas as the area where we are really called to be the heart of change. There is often, we talk about how we are being called to at once hospice a dying age and midwife a new period, a new earth or a new reality, a new era. So we've been talking about this for a long time. And so when we're talking about that kind of energy or that kind of medicine, it involves a kind of complex capacity to, at one moment, dissolve and release and compost the beliefs, energies, frequencies, ways of being, stories, our culture as a whole, our cosmologies, our ways of looking at the world. All of that has been under this massive composting process. And then at the same time, for us to be emerging these new organic unfolding ways of operating in the world. It's very complex what's happening inside of each of our bodies and what's happening in our larger on our planet Earth and in our larger cosmologies. What's happening is massive. And if we're looking at it in a myopic way, if we're looking at it just based on our most recent history as humans, then we're going to be missing the big picture. So where does this takes me to, so two of the planets are moving from 29 degrees Pisces to 0 Aries. And those are the outer planets. We also have Venus, and really Venus is who is guiding our journey right now. She is also going through an extraordinary cycle right now, that is unprecedented, in many ways, where she has been activating that point as well, back and forth. So this, what I'm referring to it as now, Pamela Gregory is an astrologer who talks about zero Aries as the creation degree. And that degree is referred to in many different ways. I'm seeing it as the degree of emergence, or the emergent degree. Zero Aries is the place where we emerge into this new foundational reality. And so part of what's happening this year that blows my mind is that we've got we've got these two outer planets of Saturn and Neptune activating that point twice because they're retrograding back and forth. We have Venus beginning a new cycle where she's also activating that point, again, three times. And we also have a Mercury retrograde cycle that is activating that point 3 times. And beyond that, we have also began the year with the nodes, the lunar nodes shifting from zero Aries back to Pisces. So what's happening is we've got this back and forth movement from 29 Pisces to zero Aries, many, many times by all these different planetary bodies. And that's not to mention that, of course, the moon does that every month. The moon moves through these areas every month. But now we've got Mercury, Venus, and these outer planets and the nodes all activating these points in a massive, unprecedented way. And so the question, that I would pose is, how do we move through this zone of such massive change that is inviting us into this place of potent creation, and to be the ones who are bringing forward these new frequencies, these new ways of being? What is necessary for us to hold this place of planting seeds? It's really a seed planting as well. That whatever we are really focusing our attention and our energy right now really is growing something new. So we've got all these moments of a planting of a new way of being. And so what feels like is happening is there's all this energy out there that is kind of it's so loud. And for some of us, we're being called to meet that energy with a very new creative frequency. So out in the world, we are out there and we are planting something new in the outer reality. For some of us, it's more internal. And for many of us, it's also more personal. It's in our more personal, local, bioregional zones that we're wanting to plant those kinds of seeds. So something to understand is that because these zones are so unprecedented, and we could see that void or that gestational portal between 29 Pisces to zero Aries, we could see that as, again, it's a place to plant the seeds of the new reality we want to see coming. It is a place where we might find ourselves often in what feels like a very dreamy, kind of unreal, surreal zone. And we can learn to stop time, in a sense, in those moments. So there's something about, there's a chaotic energy as well there. We could see it as chaotic or chaotic, on the level that it's pure potential. It's pure potential. It's also a reset, right? So that's what we are invited into again and again and again and again and again this year, especially early on in the year. And so what is being asked of us is to continue to come back into what we really want. What do we actually want? And so that it's important for us to step away from whatever that momentum has been that we're seeing playing out right now, which I would actually say it doesn't look that way on the outside, but that this is the old paradigm playing out. These are the dinosaurs kind of crashing around, right? There's all the noises getting louder because we are waking up internally. We are waking up our hearts right now. Now, my mind says something different. And my mind actually says it's irresponsible to actually say this right now. But my sense, if I really look at it from all of me, mind and heart aligned, if I actually look at it from the heart center, then what I recognize is that the reality that has been decaying and is overripe and is ready for complete composting now, that those cosmologies, those paradigms that we're moving out of, we there's so much momentum there that there absolutely has to be a separation from that, meaning to go deeper into our own hearts, deeper into our own wisdom, to be in practices of orienting to love and to the heart and to wisdom. Um, it's a requirement for many of us to step away from that paradigm long enough to really listen deeply to what is new and what is wanting to flower that might be quite sensitive. So what I want to get to with all of this, I didn't intend to come in here kind of rambling, um, very Piscean, right? There's so much Pisces, Neptune energy. I haven't even talked about that. We're still on the more Neptune Pisces end of things right now, as I'm speaking as well. And it's going to move more into Aries, okay? So, but so going back to the color of pink, what I started when I started writing about it, again, all this anger and resistance and discomfort with the color pink, like, that's not enough. Like that, that might be too soft, too weak, too passive. Is it a sedated kind of unconsciousness? Like, is that pink color? Is that what it is? So I had to kind of meet all of that. And then when I dropped deeper, 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 there were a couple things that come through. One of which is that, many, many, many spiritual teachers at this time who I really connect to and who I'm feeling there's a deep truth there, keep saying, whether it's indigenous spiritual leaders, whether it's channels, whether it's astrologers, whoever it is, that the one common theme is that we as a human species are needing to come into coherence and congruency and in coming home to the heart. So coming into more of the frequency of, um, there's the idea of coherence, which is when we are as an ecology, our bodies, our minds, our spirits are all unified and they're working well together. So there's a feeling of harmony. And there's, of course, with Heart Math and other organizations, they literally show how the body changes when we are in that kind of internal harmonious state and how it affects the world around us. This is something that, of course, many spiritual traditions are trying to help us to understand how to operate from that frequency more and more. And so, if we are going through these portals with all of this Omega Alpha, this 29 Pisces to 0 Aries, if that keeps happening, and if that's an open zone where we can see the future very powerfully, um, if we're coming from that place of inner congruency, if we're coming from that place of love and harmony and one heart, one mind, then we're seeding that into the future. Even as we're in this massive period of having to face the most extreme completion of the older way. In any case, so thinking about pink, what pink is connected, every color has a connection to a energy center of the body. And where the heart center is often connected, heart can be seen as the personal heart, love, personal love. It is the center of the body. It's a sacred center. And then we also can see that the thymus, there is kind of the high heart, which is kind of a hidden chakra or energy center that is often worked with in more mystical ways. And that can be seen as the aspect, well, it can be seen in many ways. One of the ways I've heard it described by intuitive Cindy Dale is that this is the place in the body, the energy center, where we can literally access when I actually have been trained to do meditations, one of the things she trains people to do is, instead of going out of the body, when traveling kind of astrally into other realms, or when you do a guided meditation and you're working with a different planet or star or guides or whatever, after many years of doing work with the energy centers and chakras, she came to recognize that it was better in meditations, to literally enter through the thymus, to travel to wherever you want to travel, because our physical body is it's a template. it's a hologram in a sense that our body contains within it all worlds, all things. So we ourselves, each of us, contain within us the entire reality. And so if we're wanting to gather spiritual insight and information, that it's important to do it from within our own energy system, in our own body, so that it's actually so it's true for us. So it's authentic. So it comes from within our own field of our own jurisdiction, our own wisdom centers. And so the high heart can be seen as an access point to higher wisdom. The thymus or the high heart also can help us connect to what Lee Harris, an intuitive who has been doing some very potent channeling around the future years, and he's been doing this for many years, what his guides would refer to as the cosmic heart, which is, the way I would see that from the way they describe that is that it's the difference between, if you feel like this love, a personal love for a baby or a child or your mother or your beloved or a puppy, that's a very personal human experience of love that actually is absolutely sacred and that we are needing to return to right now to keep really rooted into our organic humanity, right? That's hugely important, but that's more the realm of the personal heart. And so that's the first thing, is to open that and to get really congruent within our personal heart. And then it's essential to move into the high heart, which is more of that place of actual true unity consciousness. It's more of the Christ consciousness, where it's the kind of reality what Zoe Christina Solaris, who I've been studying with in the last year, would refer to as the anointed reality. That is the love frequency and the love intelligence that people tune into when they have profound near-death experiences or spiritual awakenings, where they touch that anointed reality or that higher reality that is always existent, but that we as humans are in these physical forms and through different cycles of time can be more shielded or more veiled from experiencing, right? So, but this is a time, according to so many prophecies, so many spiritual guides and teachers, so many indigenous wisdom keepers, this is the time where we are literally on planet Earth due to changes in the Earth's energy field and that magnetic field, which is lowering. And you can find articles and research about that, that our Earth herself and our own bodies as an extension of Mother Earth are being impacted by higher frequency energies at this time where our consciousness, our intelligence, our very bodies are changing. And as a result of this, we are actually opening to a greater capacity to be multidimensional, a greater capacity to connect to that cosmic heart, that pure essence of unconditional love that those who have died and go to the other side always say that they experience, that's beyond what we in our human daily reality are often able to access. Well, moving into a time of greater awakening and spiritual and alignment has to do with our capacity to open that greater cosmic unconditionally loving heart, which is the part of us that can then dissolve those spaces of othering that we have been so conditioned into, and that is being even more deeply encouraged with the what's playing out in politically in the media and all of that. And again, I'm not saying don't connect into that at all, but what I'm saying is that when you do, counter it with practices that put you in your personal heart and that also connect you to that place of greater love that is unifying. So what I began to connect with was that Pisces, we can understand the sign of Pisces, because again, a lot of what's happening here is we're shifting from 29, the very final degree of the zodiac, to 0 Aries, the beginning degree of a new cycle within the tropical zodiacal system, which is a Western astrological frame. And, my sense is that the healing needs to begin with a completion of that frame. So Pisces, 29 Pisces is like it's like a very old soul. Those of you who are listening who are very old souls who understand that idea, can understand that it's like, um, there can be a world weariness, there can be an exhaustion, and many of us are feeling that because of all of the lifetimes, all of the energies that have been played out. And there's this sense of carrying so much history, carrying so much within our energy fields. And it's a lot of wisdom. And it's also sometimes it's the way that we can feel very full right now. There's so much information coming in. There's this experience of looking around and kind of feeling like, really, still? We're still devastating Mother Earth? Really, still? We're still killing each other? We're still allowing the oligarchs to extract from our mother on this level? How is this possible? And so there's this accumulation of having lived through so many lifetimes, and that part of us actually sometimes can be even more seduced by the belief that everything that's playing out is just going to continue. And this is kind of a nihilism or cynicism can kind of set in. It's like, well, I guess it's never going to change. All these prayers, all this ceremonial work, all of this growth is for nothing, right? So there's can be this nihilistic kind of like giving in energy that's just really deep grief, actually, over so many lifetimes of experiencing all of this struggle and suffering. But I can think of Pisces as a whole as interestingly that it being the color white, because if you think about the color white, this is such a riddle, but white actually includes all of the colors of the full spectrum. And so there's something that can happen at the very last degree of Pisces as it crosses over, where it is, it's all the colors, it's all the experiences of humanity up to now. And there can be this moment where there's kind of a dissolving of all those experiences. And that light, that white color, is then kind of opening into light. And then when it's shifting into Aries, this is what's fascinating. And I don't know the relationship between the color white and or light and the color red, that frequency, although I know a lot of people are healing with the red frequency right now. But my sense is it goes from white to red. Aries is red, Pisces is white. That's my feeling. That's not, it's just what I started to feel. What is pink? It's like what I started to feel was, and again, Venus is beginning a new cycle that's kind of a combination of Aries and Pisces. I'll talk about that in a moment. But what I started to recognize is that when the two colors together, the alchemy of those two colors is pink. So that in between space that I think this year we're being invited into is that space of pink. And the more I thought about that, and again, even when I say the word, it's just like, that's never been my color. um, I started to recognize how one of the strongest features of patriarchy is its belief that strength, it's this distorted belief in what strength actually is. That from the old patriarchal paradigm, strength is a certain kind of distorted red. It's like violence, it's aggression, it's belligerence. It's what we saw playing out on the world stage with Trump and Zelensky and JD Vance, bringing in the politics. That's the playbook of how control, power, what power looks like. What does it mean to be powerful? That's a patriarchal perception. That's strength, right? Um, from a spiritual soul perspective, that is the most corrupted, weak, childlike, childish way of operating. And in fact, it's the indicator of a being or a state of consciousness that is deeply underdeveloped. And I would also say wounded, deeply wounded. So hasn't really fully developed. And that's why it would be behaving in this way. So we have equated strength with brute force. We have equated strength with more of the distorted red energies of violence, power over, control, extraction, all of the distorted experiences we have through patriarchy. When I say patriarchy, I'm not referring to men, I'm referring to a distortion of the last 5,500 years that has a lot of layers to it. So I started thinking about the work, for example, of Anita Moorjani, who wrote the book. The first book was Dying to Be Me. And she is she had a near-death experience, and part of what came through from her through that experience was this wisdom through some of her guides around the importance of empaths and people who have great sensitivity at this time of change. And what she was shown is that as an evolution, that all humans are on a spectrum from being more or less compassionate, empathetic to, uh, less sensitive in those ways. And that in order to survive literally as a species, as an evolutionary, um, a spiritual, psychological, developmental, evolutionary leap, that more and more and more humans were literally being born who were highly sensitive and empathetic and compassionate, very far on that end of the spectrum. And that this was because, as a humanity, as a species, if we actually want to continue to be here on this earth, and if we're going to evolve, we have to cultivate our sensitivity and our attunement. Um, so, again, what's true strength? My sense is that it is this mysterious alchemy. It's that center point between the end and the beginning, where it's the pink that is this medicine of sensitivity, love, receptivity, attunement. And I see and feel that frequency in so many people who, more and more, what I'm drawn to is just who are the individuals in our communities and our lives who are very quietly, day by day, doing the work, keeping their hearts open. They might be a teacher, they might be a firefighter, they may not to, sound so whatever, but they might be that elder in your church. They might be there's so many quiet people who have been, it might be the activist, like a woman we have in our community, who I think of as our local Lorax, who has been working tirelessly behind the scenes with a very tiny group in our neighborhood association to make sure that CAFOs, these massive livestock feeding, massive like hog or cow or chicken farms aren't coming into our community because they devastate the landscape. So she's doing this work quietly for love. You can't do that kind of work over that many years without it coming from a place of love. So when I say pink, I'm not talking about this passive kind of thing. I'm talking about true love that is absolutely potent and powerful, but often not seen. It's not visible because it's within that spectrum of light that with our lives and our reality that is actually very immature, we don't see it. And so I wanted to share as well this interesting thing that kind of came up as well, which is that I've been recognizing, many of us recognize, and I have to work on this all the time. Keeping our point of focus, again, keeping our frequency, our point of focus in the direction of what we actually want. This isn't about perfection, but returning again and again to practices of prayer or of actually offering ourselves to our friends, our family members, our community, even when that can feel awkward or uncomfortable, if we're more oriented inwardly, as I am at this stage in my life, doing that in balance and also extending kindness to ourselves, taking space to really connect to ourselves every day. That when we focus our attention and bring our love and our awareness and our presence to our own bodies, our own lives, our own um, the spaces where we live, the land where we live, through prayers, blessings, just setting a strong intention to keep coming back into presence and into love. When we do that, we literally change the environment around us. And I'm going to share that part of what I experienced in terms of an experiment with that personally. It relates to, for example, some of you have followed the work of Veda Austin. She works with water and water molecules, and she believes that water is literally God consciousness. And she has done all of these studies where she will, and they're kind of a furthering of the work that was done by, I can't remember his name, a Japanese researcher who was studying the shapes that form in water molecules when you are holding the intention or the strong frequency of love or of strong, intense negative emotions. He was showing the impact on the water, literally, that it affects the shape of the water. So she's taking that even further, and it's been really powerful to listen to her. Again, Pam Gregory is an astrologer who's been interviewing her and bringing awareness to her work. But it makes you really consider how physically, literally, and energetically we imprint in the environment around us based on our congruency, our coherence, our connection to love and grounding, or not. And so I did an experiment where I had gotten these pink roses right around, I think it was before, Valentine's Day. But these roses, I started putting them out on this place on the land close to me where I'm establishing a fire, a council fire. I brought those roses out there. I've done a lot of different work with the roses, but the majority of the roses were in one bunch. And then I had one rose that was in one individual um, little vase. And the one that was in the vase, I have it near where I work, and I'd often admire it and talk to it and just spend time with it. And it's getting a lot of one-on-one attention from me versus the other roses that were by themselves. So the other roses wilted and died literally 2 weeks ago. And this rose that I've continued to be giving attention to, it still is soft. It's still very much alive. It's an absolute miracle. I'm not kidding. Like, it is so different. And I've seen this happen now twice. So I've been experimenting as well with the focus of energy and frequency and attention and presence. And I would say that when we are bringing ourselves out into the world in one way, shape, or form, if we want to affect change, no matter what, our state of being, coming home to this sense of love and presence is absolutely important. There may be nothing more important than that. And it's not passive. It's not passive. It's very powerful, and it requires a lot of rigorous attention and focus. So, as much as a large part of my conditioning and my programming was afraid of speaking about her guiding the way, speaking about pink, all of that, what I've been getting from greater wisdom is that this medicine of sensitivity, of love, of gentleness is so much more powerful than we know. And it's time for us to invert our idea about what true power is and begin to really step into a different frequency of power. And so I'm going to just complete by saying, I have it written in what I've written. What's what's happening this month of March is in the astrological realms, it's massive. I think you may already know we're stepping into the eclipse portal with on the 13th. So we've got a total lunar eclipse, a blood moon that's happening on the, excuse me if I say it's the 12th or the 13th, my brain. I'll have it, in the notes that you'll see with this video. But the total lunar eclipse is I believe it's the 13th next week. And that opens a 2-week eclipse portal. Arguably, some would say it's already open. Many people would say it opens like 30 days or whatever before the eclipse and after. So we're already feeling the eclipse energies. But needless to say, in ordinary times, just that eclipse window is understood to be kind of a time out of time experience where the veils are thinner and we are going through kind of a timeline, like there's an acceleration of time. So there's already in any of these windows of time, there's the potential for us to be very conscious of the way that we are holding our own energy and cultivate that in such a way that we are seeding greater harmony, greater peace, greater love, greater coherency into the world around us. It's more powerful then because we're literally stepping into these timelines where we can affect change in every dimension at one time. So that's already happening in an eclipse window. And again, it's the 13th is the first, the full lunar eclipse, and then the 29th is a partial solar eclipse. So it's like a super full moon, super new moon. So that already right there is a window of great intensity where our state of being and our way of behaving within our sphere of influence has great impact. And so add to that the reality that we also have Mercury stationing retrograde the day after the lunar eclipse on the 13th. I think it's the 14th that Mercury stations retrograde. So we're going to have a 3-week period that Mercury is stationing retrograde. Again, with Mercury retrograde, can be a time to go inward, and it can be a time to um, really be in this phase of creativity, of reflection, of reprogramming our consciousness. But it's also a portal of great ceremonial potency and power, right? So the way we use our minds, the way we use our consciousness is really important, to be very deliberate and intentional with that, to govern that for ourselves. Um, and then, so that's a ceremonial portal. The eclipse window is a ceremonial portal. Not only that, we're moving through the spring equinox, and anytime we have spring equinoxes and solstices, then that is as well a time of where the veils are thinner and where it's a very powerful time for ceremony. So that's going to be the 20th. So we have all of those activations. And at the same time, we've got all this, the sun is actually crossing that portal from 29 Pisces to 0 Aries. In the Mercury retrograde, Mercury is also activating those points. And add to that the reality that we have Venus in this month in her most mysterious and powerful phase within her 19-month cycle. And that is when she is completing one cycle and beginning another. And the way that that always works is that it's when she is it begins when she's at her brightest and highest in the evening sky, which is where she's been. And then it's when she's crossing, I'm gonna actually do it this side. She's crossing from our view on Earth, she's crossing between us and the sun. So she's retrograde. She's literally in a retrograde cycle for about 40 days. So that again, of course, in sacred numbers, and we understand that Moses went to the wilderness for 40 days. That 40-day window is a time of great initiation, rites of passage occur in that time. It's when we're in the wilderness, in a sense, going through a massive period of death and rebirth, one could say. In the Venus alchemy work and the Venus Inanna work that I've done, we can see that as a phase or a period of, we call it the metamorphic underworld, which is a time where, again, there's this kind of quantum leap. There's a complete ending of one cycle and beginning of another. It's a complete ending and beginning. So we're in that window, and this precise dates are that Venus stationed retrograde on March 1st. She will station direct April 12th. So that's the 42-day window. Then within that window, there's also the way that she is going to disappear into the beams of the sun. And technically, we'll know that we won't really see her from about, oh gosh, when does she disappear? She's in the heart of the sun on March 22nd. She's Cazimi. She's at Cazimi on the 22nd. She will be harder to see for about 5 days before that and about 5 days after. And the 29th of March, which is the same day as the solar eclipse, is when Venus is she's separated by 10 degrees from the sun. So that's about when we're going to start seeing her broadly, more generally in the morning sky. It's about when she's birthed as a morning star, beginning a new cycle. So Venus is very much guiding us through this next 3 quarters of the year, guiding us through the spring equinox portal, this emergence portal into this new reality. Now, if that wasn't enough, there's one other thing, which is that, so many prophecies have talked so many of the astrological cycles have pointed to this time, as I've spoken of, 2017 to 2024 is this massive portal we're moving through. And then 2025 is when we really are moving into the new time. And according to certain Vedic astrologers from the Hindu or Indian traditions, who often in different frames will talk about the ending of the Kali Yuga or the Dark Ages and a movement into a time of greater enlightenment. There are some who are saying that March 25th, which is right through the heart of this Venus cycle, is, and some would even say March 29th, is when we are moving into or fully moving out of the Kali Yuga. So there are so many frames that we can look at this through, but one thing to understand is that we are in this, you can feel it, it's a back and forth movement. And so what we're really asked to do is be very aware, whatever it is that we're doing, uh, that we are focusing our awareness and our attention. So we are coming from that place of the high heart. We're coming from that place of love and inner congruency. And to recognize, no matter what those voices out there say to us, that this is not weakness. Sensitivity, love, gentleness, attunement, the feminine qualities of connection, these are not weaknesses. These are the strengths that are going to take us into the future. And I want to speak about this from the perspective of the work that I've done with Indigenous communities historically. And one of the stories that you'll hear again and again is that, and I know Lila June Johnson is one, as a young Dene, young Indigenous woman who is bringing so much beauty, so much beautiful music, so much of a new way of understanding who we are as sacred humans. I highly recommend her and her work and her um, what she's bringing into the world. But I'll always remember, first I had met her through mutual friends in the New Mexico community. And then at the beginning of Standing Rock, I began to follow her work and to share that with our Venus Alchemy community because she was modeling. I thought of her as a young Indigenous Martin Luther King, and I'm bringing her up right now because what she was modeling was, first of all, she was not at Standing Rock. She had relatives who were there, and she was very connected to Sacred Stone Camp. Hope I'm saying that right. In any case, the way she was transmitting and sharing what was happening there was through prayer, was through ceremony, through song. So she was helping to filter what was happening on the ground at Standing Rock, which was in many ways quite painful and brutal because when you see people on the ground who are defending land that is right there, that is, it's the earth herself that is the battleground, right? So there are so many forces that want to extract, literally and physically, and have been extracting. And indigenous lands tend to be the ones that contain mineral rights, that contain biodiversity. So we saw that at Standing Rock. We saw 600 indigenous tribes, people from 600 indigenous tribes arrive there. But the way that the story was being told of what was happening on the ground at Standing Rock, what I learned was that the way the story was being told was incredibly important. What was being transmitted, what was going viral. And the way Lila June was transmitting that message was always through a place of prayer, always through a place of finding beauty, always through a place of curating the medicine from the ground in a way that was making beauty from it. And there's truth and clarity. Now, beauty isn't just what feels good and looks good. The frequency of truth is incredibly powerful and beautiful and heart-centered, even when it's painful. But she was transmitting the message of what was happening there with great responsibility. And I see her as a great, I don't want to put anybody on a pedestal because we all have this capacity. But I do think that at this moment, listening to heart-centered, wise Indigenous voices like Lila June's is incredibly important because they are our elders right now. They are our elders as a human species. They can share something with us because many of them do have stories from what they say is time immemorial of other periods where humans were in balance and harmony with the earth. They still have a touchstone there in a way that often for us, we need to do a lot of work to try to get back into that space. So Lila June, I remember when Trump was first elected after Standing Rock, the way she would refer to him was as her uncle. She would talk about him as her uncle. And that's a very challenging thing for us to do right now for many reasons. But to me, it spoke of the wisdom of her spirit because when we dignify our own selves and who we are, and we come from a place of greater spiritual maturity, we are creating that world around us. We're modeling something for our children and our grandchildren. And it's not the popular stance. It's not the way that's promoted because the loudest voices in the room are what get the most attention. But she would speak in that way, and it always moved my heart. And when you speak in that way, you get a lot of kickback, especially if you can imagine being an Indigenous woman speaking in that way. That's not popular. So she would speak in that way. And the other thing I remember was just I've kind of observed her from a distance and listening to the way she was grappling with and wrestling with in her dreams, meditations, her work, this question of the many times where Indigenous peoples here in the Americas welcomed the settlers that came in with love and with kindness. And they did that because they were still connected and attuned, and they were people who were modeling a way of harmony. And I remember her really grappling with, almost, I think, traveling back, if I'm remembering this correctly, and connecting to some of the early ancestors and asking, would you have done it differently? Had you have known what was going to happen? And that they would say no, because that would be betraying the dignity of who we actually are. That would be the worst thing, is to stoop to that level. We're not going to allow this to dehumanize us. That's not who we are. And so that really stuck with me. And I'm not going to say I always come from that place. I still, day by day, moment by moment, I think, well, sometimes the appropriate reaction is going to be more of like a teenage rebellion kind of reaction. So, there are many people who are working with that frequency, and I think it's needed. But for me, when I have to tune into my own who I am and what I want to need to stand for, it's to be a bridge. And I think we're moving into more of that red energy. But in this moment that I'm speaking, there's still a lot of that Neptune, a lot of that Pisces. And I think we need that. I think we need that kindness. And I also, in a larger sense, do believe what the Quero and other Indigenous people would say is that we as modern humans are spiritually at a stage of adolescence. And there's never a guarantee when an adolescent goes through a rite of passage that they're going to make it out alive in traditional societies. So there's no guarantee of that. But my sense is that we are going to have to mature spiritually if we are going to make it through this passage. So I'm not a teenager, and I'm not going to pretend to be a teenager. I am someone with a tremendous amount of Capricorn medicine. And one of the insights that came to me recently when I asked, what do we have on our side right now? On our side, what do we have strengthening us? And we have indigenous wisdom that is being transmitted in ways now that we have not had access to as modern peoples whose indigenous relatives are much further down the line. And we also, I think astrologically, we have the elders of, I see it as an elder standing in the room with us now because we have gone through this massive Pluto and Capricorn cycle. So that now we have this deeply transformed Capricorn wisdom. And I do see that as the indigenous voices all around us. We've been through this massive initiation already. So this more mature Capricorn wisdom is in the room with us right now. The grandmothers and the grandfathers are there with us. They're standing with us. They're strengthening us. They're living through us. They're speaking through us. I see that as a strength we have right now. I also see that with the Saturn and Pisces medicine that we've been in the midst of, and that's still going to continue. It's going to come back next year after Saturn moves into Aries, and it's going to move back into Pisces. So we still have that we're working with right now. And that is all about spiritual maturity. So, I'm going to come back to an indigenous concept of one heart, one mind, that I have a beautiful elder in my community here who is one of those people who carries, literally her name's Rose, if you're listening. And she carries that frequency of kindness and of love. And she has been a quiet force in our community, really transmitting that in her own way and through for many, many years, quietly and steadily. And she, when I've done ceremony with her, I sometimes get so frustrated because she's always saying, what her elders taught her, because she's learned from indigenous teachers, guides for many, many, many years, and she's lived in that way, is that we always have to have one heart, one mind when we come into ceremony. And so there always has to be a unifying principle or concept or idea. And I have the hardest time with that. My Gemini moon is all over the place. I've got like 15 threads going at one time, so I'm still working on it. I may never be capable of that. But what I want to complete with is when I say that she's guiding, what I mean by that is that I do see that I absolutely still feel that the feminine is rising in our world within men, women, non-binary folks, trans folks, that within our larger human species, part of what's happening is a natural balancing. to connect more to the frequency of the feminine, or the yin is maybe even better way to say it. And, to move away from the gendered, um, some of the ways we get caught there. Um, but my sense when she's guiding, when I feel that, is literally that Venus is guiding, that she is taking us through this portal, that she is helping us to somehow bridge the medicines of Pisces and Aries, and that she's helping us move into our high heart. And so my sense is that that's what we're invited into, is to move into that high heart. So that's the guiding one mind, one heart medicine that came through. I hope this has been helpful for you. I know I didn't start out with a orientation to the astrology, but I haven't been online for a long time and I just had to speak from the heart. So hopefully this is supportive. I'm sending you so much love out there, and please do reach out. Please do subscribe. Please do share with anyone if you think this is helpful. And I'm just sending so much love as we move through this portal.